I'm Sonam. Welcome back to AI Chronicles new episode. Today I'm here with one of my favorite AI instructors, Luis Serrano. Hi Luis, how are you doing?
Hi, Sonam. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Happy to be at AI
Absolutely.
Chronicles.
Glad to hear that. Could you give us a brief introduction to yourself?
Yes, I am a mathematician that turned machine learning engineer. I'm from Colombia originally. I live in Canada, in Toronto, and my big passion is education. So I have a YouTube channel where I put a lot of videos, a book called Rocky Machine Learning, and in general, I just like to spread the knowledge and teach, and also learn stuff all the time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have attended some of your, when you were back in Cohere, I have attended some of your webinars and then, LLM University, so many cool things. And of course, your YouTube channel is great. Great information to learn from. But yeah, I'm so glad that we got to do this podcast. So I have some fun questions for you.
Perfect.
First thing I want to start because we live in the world of large language models being everywhere almost. What do you think is the misconception about LLMs that AI individuals or organizations have?
That's a great question. I feel like we do that with in most AI technologies, which is we kind of give them more human-like properties, and we think of it as a person, and we don't realize that they may make mistakes that a person wouldn't. And so, one big misconception I have is that, as you know, they hallucinate a lot,
Yeah.
and people think that they would answer questions well, but occasionally hallucinate every now and then. But it's the opposite. They always hallucinate and they
Hmm.
sometimes hallucinate the truth accidentally, but they're meant to hallucinate. They actually are build. The main thing they do is guess the next word. They do it word by word. So nowhere in the process can you tell an LLM to say the correct thing. Like they're not a database. They don't have information recorded. They know the language. They have correlations between words in a very high dimensional space, and so they're able to talk convincingly. So many times they answer a question very convincingly, but it's completely wrong. So I would say we have to be careful with them. Still work with them. They're great, but be careful with what taking what they say as a fact.
Right, right. I totally agree with that. It's like people have started putting LLMs or just AI in general on a pedestal, and I think that's not something you should do. I'm totally
Absolutely.
with you on that. So, yeah, so that actually leads me to the next question. Using fine-tuning, RAG, and
Mhm.
prompt engineering, do you think we have solved the hallucinations as you were mentioning about it?
I think we get pretty far.
Mm.
I wouldn't say 100% because you can't really say that for anything, especially
Right,
with
right.
AI. But
Yeah.
I think we can. Fine tuning is very good because it makes the LEM train more on the data that you want it.
Hmm.
It still doesn't solve it.
Right.
RAG, I would say with RAG, good putting good prompts, good preambles, and RAG really does as much as basically the most you can do to remove hallucinations because it makes it learn. It makes it find the answer and then give the answer, right?
Hmm.
So that's I mean LLMs are very good at following instructions. If you tell
Right.
them to do something, they're very likely to do it right. And so
Mhm.
if you say, okay, answer this question, but only from the text that you got
Right.
here, then
Hmm.
it then I trust them, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say we're pretty this is the most we can do, and it's so far, and it's pretty good. Like I trust a model with RAG prompt engineering and fine tuning. You know.
That's great. And do you think like fine tuning, I know that RAG and prompt engineering is fine, not super, I guess, expensive. But
Mhm.
when it comes to fine tuning, it might get, resource heavy,
Yeah.
time consumption, and especially gets computationally expensive.
Yeah.
So do you think or do you see many organizations or people doing a lot of fine tuning on regular basis, or what do you think about it?
You can do it. This is one of those things that you can do at the level of computation that you have, right? So if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that much, you can still do some fine tuning on your data. If you have a lot of data,
Mm-hmm.
then it's assumed that you would also have a lot of computing power, right? Like if you're a big
Yeah.
company, then and that's okay, or a lot of money to use. instances for this. So I would say this is something you can do on a not so big level scale and have okay results, or if you want to do it at a huge scale, get huge results.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, do you think like the combination of all these three techniques, especially to reduce the hallucinations, do you think it's a stronger, I guess, option or choice? Not choice, I mean, something that people should do, like combining fine tuning, prompt
Yeah.
engineering, and RAG? Okay.
Absolutely. I think the three would work together. And I see it as a person, right? Like if you have a person who knows a lot, but you want to make them work on as let's say as a customer representative
Mm,
in your company, well, first of all, you would give them really good instructions on how to answer, right? That's the
yeah.
prompt
Yeah.
engineering, the preamble. Then you would put them through some extra training to learn your company stuff, so that's fine tuning. And then you
Mm,
would give them a bunch of books and resources and manuals and say, okay, when you have a question, look here and then answer. So I see that those three work, and then there's more stuff, that's coming up. Tool usage, I think it's the next thing, which is pretty much giving the person more uses, more things like a calculator or like other tools that they can use. So I think enhancing these LLMs it can be really powerful.
could you elaborate on the tool usage you mentioned?
Yeah, so it can be something simple, right? For example, if I ask an LLM to add 5 plus 7,
Hmm.
it can do it with text, but may get it wrong. But if instead it just pulls out a calculator app or something,
Ah,
it's
okay,
much better,
okay.
right? And then
Yeah.
you can do it with a lot more tools. You can do it with apps, go get
Hmm.
this, do this. That can be, with a good classifier that can tell you what question you're asking,
Right.
pulls out the right tool, and it's much better than answering questions by thinking of what the next word is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So moving on to your experience in the education industry,
Hmm.
and I know you've been in this industry teaching people about LLMs and so much more.
Hmm.
Uh, what are some of the best use cases have you seen people build with LLMs, especially, back when you were at Cohere, if you want to take an example from Cohere's model or just in general?
Yeah. Oh, I've been mind blown. One of my favorite things of working in DevRel at Cohere was that we would see the hackathons,
Oh, yeah.
and I would have to judge the projects. And actually, that was the hardest part of my job, was to select a winner, because you would see these amazing projects, like amazing. They were very like, just off the top of my head, they were, the people would make like role-playing games, like kind of Dungeons and Dragons style, that they would play. They would make things that will help you, a chatbot that would help you with your mental health, things that would help
Wow.
you learn, things that would combine with image generators, and you would make. There was once like a design app for uh, sort of interior design, that you would describe it, and it'll kind of give you, I don't know, just so many things. I saw so many of those, and it blown my mind, because you make the models,
Yeah.
but seeing people um, use them, it was so wonderful. Yeah, same things with the usage of tools. Like you would
Mm.
go and open Salesforce or things like that, and do things on them. Like, this was pretty fascinating. So yeah, I could go on for hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your latest? Did you build anything recently? Any
Um,
of these
I, I
LLMs?
I don't build a lot of stuff, but I do use them a lot. And so, for example, I've been using RAG a lot for my own learning process, right? But I have a very like hard time understanding
Mm-hmm.
complicated things, like reading papers or
Mm-hmm.
something is always been very difficult. I think reading papers is difficult for everybody, but I think
Oh
I have a
God,
hard
yes.
time.
Yeah.
Or just understanding, like just complicated language and stuff. And right now, I more than reading, I just kind of put the PDF
Mm.
in RAG. Like, I put it in I go to Coral, or you can do this in ChatGPT or any of those things.
Yeah.
I want to go here Coral and upload the PDF, and I start, instead of reading the paper, I just start asking you questions, right? So I go, explain this to me very briefly, as a 5-year-old, and then I go, give me 5 points, and I go, elaborate on this, elaborate on that, ask me questions, quiz me. Um, And I've done that, and I love it. And I actually, a friend of mine was defending her, no, doing her PhD examination recently, and I told her, why don't you try this? Make it ask questions and say, ask me questions the way a PhD examination would go on something that was very, it was not tech, it was humanities,
Hmm. Oh,
and
wow.
uh,
Okay.
and it started giving some really good questions and stuff. So I find that it's very yeah, I to make my videos, I use it now. Like I go, okay, and it starts picking up what I'm thinking. Like I go, okay, I want to work with this example. Help me explain this, but with this
Hmm.
example. And after first it doesn't get it, but after a while it starts really picking it up, and it's just absolutely fascinating. Yeah, sometimes it lies to me, so I have
That's
to be careful. One day I put something wrong in a video, and I had to cut it off, like remove it, because people started saying this is not true, and it's just ChatGPT told me like some
oh, crap.
it just made up an
Yeah.
algorithm, completely made it up, and it
Oh, man.
sounded perfect. So you gotta watch out.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely have to keep an eye on what they're saying. Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks for
exactly.
sharing that. Speaking of more into AI in education, how can AI be effectively integrated into educational systems to enhance the learning outcomes while, continuing to ensure the equity and accessibility for all students? Like, yeah.
No, I think this is a great question. I think when it comes to accessibility, like there's the fact that it can be personalized, because I feel like the big problem, I mean, education has had many problems in terms of like not being accessible to everybody. I think tech education has brought this to more people, which I find it amazing. I think we still got work to do to bring it to everyone in the world and make it accessible. But I think it's been broadened and democratized more, which is good. One aspect that needs help is the fact that it teaches to only one type of person, right? Like education, classical education only caters to one type of student, which is learns
Mhm.
in one particular way,
Right.
which is listening, without doing anything. And I'm not like that. I've never been able to learn, just why I was such a bad student all the time. Um, because when you're just learning passively, by watching somebody do something on the board, it's kind of like
Mm.
going to the gym and watching people work out and hoping to gain muscle like that, right? Like it doesn't to get fit.
Oh, wouldn't that be easy?
I would love that, but
Oh,
it
yeah,
doesn't
me
work
too.
like that, and it also doesn't work in education, and I think it definitely, uh, I think large language models can be very helpful. I haven't seen like a particular application. I'm expecting many, but I do, I think the fact that you can sort of have a tutor, like I encourage students to ask it questions, to get them to quiz them, to learn like that, like you're talking to somebody.
Mhm.
I think that can be done, but I would love to see things that make it more interactive, where the student can like maybe write something, and the model can grade it, give them ideas, um, where you can maybe play some games, learn things in a way that you're building. Code, for
Mhm.
example, has been very helpful. Like when you sort of it checks your code, it helps you write
Mhm.
better code. So I would love to see this go in the direction of interactive, hands-on education, because I think
Right.
that's the way to learn.
I think that's one of the best ways to learn, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, just the interactive nature of it.
yeah.
Nice.
I've also seen, just to mention a couple of things I've seen, in AI and education. There's a couple of apps that do like some kind of like back and forth, like they
Hmm.
they look at your reaction to
Okay.
something and then change the setting, right? Like you're watching a video, you're kind of like you're reading something and you lose your attention, it puts a
Mm.
video, you lose your attention, puts a quiz. I
Ooh.
feel like listening to the signals of the student, maybe it sounds promising. It's probably something you can like say, okay, now I'm teaching this person this way or that
Mm.
way. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Do
I
you
don't know.
know the name of this thing that you mentioned?
I saw one called Ahura AI. I think it's good. That they're starting to work with those models. And I
Mm.
think there may be more coming up. So it could be a promising. A
Yeah, it
promising.
sounds like it. I mean, at least it can work for one-on-one for to begin with,
Yeah.
but before
Yeah.
it gets with multiple students. That's
Yeah.
a very good use case. I mean, if that app was something that I was using and trying to learn in school, and it sees that I have zoned out in the 5 minutes, I think
Oh
that would be
yeah.
very
Mine would
useful.
just be blinking the whole time.
Yeah,
And then it makes the
exactly.
professor, I feel like people always are scared, oh, I'm going to lose my job. No, I don't. As an
Yeah.
educator, I want to lose that part of the job. You know what I mean? Like, I want to have, like, if it's something a computer can do, I want the computer to do it. Then educators can work on things that are more creative, can work on things that like more creating lessons, things like that. So I feel like if something can be automatized, it's because we're meant to be doing something of higher level.
Yeah.
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 I agree. Yeah. Do you have any your go-to generative AI app tech stack that you usually like to use?
Tech stack. It depends on things. I mean,
Mhm.
since I was at Cohere, I've been using the Cohere one a lot. For anything like embeddings, I go to
Mhm.
Cohere. You can do classification, which basically results on how good the embedding was, or clustering, which also depends on the embedding. So for anything like that, I go to that. And also semantic search, because that
Mm.
depends on a good embedding. The embeddings there are really good. And when it comes to generating, I've tried the Cohere one, and I've tried the OpenAI, like ChatGPT, obviously. I haven't tried others, but I think all of them. I think there's a lot of good stuff out there. So
Nice.
yeah.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Moving on to a fun little bit of this conversation that I'm very interested in, and only because you mentioned that you won't mind talking
Okay.
about it.
Oh.
It's quantum computing, the
Ooh.
two words that I always want to learn about, but it takes time to learn the word quantum and
Yeah.
everything around it. So, if you were asked, because I'm asking you, what is quantum computing, if you have to explain it in 1 to 2 lines, if it is even
Okay.
possible to explain it?
How long are the lines? Uh,
1 to 2 lines or three,
okay,
four lines. Take your
I'll,
time.
I'll try to do. Yeah, no, this is a great question. I love talking about that. Um, so I would say, like in a computer, you have
Mhm.
bits. They can be 0 or 1. In
Okay.
a quantum computer, you can have a qubit, which can be in a superposition of 0 and 1. But this is a weird superposition. It's not have 0, have 1. It's a superposition that kind of like breaks the laws of logic. Like, there's weird things that happen, that it's not just 0 and 1. You know what I mean? And so, like, basically, the imagine this. I'm gonna be a little rough around the edges here, but if I have to do an operation in a classical computer, uh, I do an operation for the 0, and then I do the operation for the 1. So I'm doing two things.
Mhm.
If I do this operation on a superposition of 0 and 1, I'm kind of doing it on both at the same time. So I am doing two things, one thing in quantum computer when the classical computer is doing two things. So here I'm
Okay.
saving, right? Imagine if that happens in scale, like anything exponential here becomes not exponential, on the other side becomes linear, right? So
Yeah.
like some problems that for the classical computer, whatever you do, they're grow exponentially. For the quantum computer, they don't. Now, that sounds very pretty. That was the first line. The second line. Now that sounds very
Mhm.
pretty, but there's a lot of pros. There's a lot of cons. There's a lot of problems with the quantum computer. For example, if you have a superposition of 0 and 1, you don't know what it is. And the moment you observe it, it either becomes a 0 or becomes a 1, but you don't know what it was before, and you're never going to be able to figure it out. So
Oh.
you have to observe them you have to be very clever about what operations you do, how you observe things, and it's not always so clear. But at the end of the day, many quantum algorithms just make, or most of them, they actually take advantage of the fact that when you do something on a qubit, you're doing something on two numbers at the same time. So if I do this on several qubits, and I can do things like entangle them and stuff like that,
Mm.
and I save a lot of work. And so they are, yeah, many problems that are hard in a cloud computer are easy for the quantum one. So it's fascinating.
It
I really love
surely
it.
is. But I do want to ask, what is superposition?
What is superposition? Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's space. I like to see it as a sphere. Imagine a sphere.
Okay.
Imagine that you
Okay.
have a switch, Because a
Okay.
classical computer is a switch on and off.
Right.
And a
Right.
big
Yeah.
computer is a
Binary.
lot of switches. You have a
Okay.
terabyte, that's a lot of switches.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you have a qubit, imagine a sphere,
Mhm.
and a sphere can be, if your switches on your house were a sphere, if your little special dot on the sphere is on the North Pole, that's fully on. If it's on the South Pole, it's fully off, and it's like a slider. As I slide it up and down, light goes on and off, right? So it's
Okay.
in between. And so, for example, anything in the equator is half-half, but then there's a lot of stuff in the equator because there's a lot of ways to be in a superposition of 0 and 1. So there's not just one way to be in superposition. There's a lot of them.
Different ways.
And when you
Okay.
observe, it's pretty much like, imagine you put two magnets, one in the North Pole, one in the South Pole, and the dot either goes up or goes down. And the higher it is, the more likely that it'll go up, and the lower it is, the more likely it'll go down. But you never knew where it was, because once you look at it, you modify it. And then it becomes either completely on or completely off, right?
Okay.
And then just like the classical computers, you have gates that can do, for example, the NOT gate or the
NOT
OR
gate.
and the AND that just bits enter, bits comes out. The quantum computer also has gates that can be, for example, like rotation, right? You can take your qubit, a sphere, a point in the sphere, and rotate it in the x-axis, or so you have. So a quantum computer is basically a bunch of qubits and a bunch of quantum gates, just like a classical computer is bits and gates.
Bits and gates, yeah.
And so you play with these to obtain what you want. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, I think I understood something for
Cool.
sure. Something that will help me read more into it.
Of course. Yeah.
So, because we are, both of us are in AI and so is my audience. So have you seen or worked on any applications of AI in quantum computing? If you can tell us about it.
What we worked on, yes, I've seen great stuff done in like supervised learning.
Okay.
But what I was working was unsupervised learning, in particular generative learning, because I like to think of this a quantum computers. I feel like it's more of a generator than a classical computer, because a classical computer is bad at the most simple generating problem, which is generate a 1 bit, like make a coin flip, right? Like that's a generator of 1 bit. And classical computers have a hard time doing that because you cannot. As a matter of fact, you pretend to. It's you can do a pseudo random number, but it's never random. Whereas the quantum computer is unhinged. It generates random numbers even if you don't want it to. And so the easiest problem in a quantum computer is to generate a bit randomly, and that's impossible for a classical computer, right? So I feel like if most or all the generative algorithms that I've seen in a classical computer have a slightly sort of difficult part, which is generating the number. You have to generate, for example, in a GAN, you have to generate a random number and put it through the neural network to the generator. But how do you know you generated correctly? How do you know you picked it out of the right distribution? You picked a Gaussian, you picked a uniform. Like it's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell if you went the right, if you took it of the right space. An RBM, for example, like they don't they model well, but sampling is hard and expensive and inexact. Whereas in a quantum computer, anything you do is generating. Even if you want an answer that is deterministic, it still generates a random number that may or may not be your answer, right? So you can use that in your favor when it comes to generative learning. And so what we did was we took a quantum circuit and we, in the same way that you train a neural network, we would train, the angles of the rotation and all these things using gradient descent to generate data that looks a lot like the data that we gave it. That's called a QCBM. Quantum circuit born machine is what we're working on. And so we saw empirically, we didn't prove anything, but we saw empirically that it was generating better stuff than most generators, classic generators of the same size. Obviously, you can compare it with a huge GAN or a huge neural network or something. But it was doing quite well because it was kind of not overfitting so much. It was learning the rules of the data more than memorizing the data. Like it would sort of come up with new points that could have been part of the data set, but they were not close to them.
Mm.
So it was fascinating. I think I see a lot of progress. I see a lot of promise in both supervised and unsupervised. But in particular, I feel like if quantum computers get much bigger,
Mhm.
which I hope they do, generative learning I think will get great advances.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. I had literally no idea about it because
Cool.
I do not roam around the quantum computing world whatsoever as much as I'm curious about it. But it's really good to hear. Um, okay, so I'm going to be pivoting towards our last end of the conversation. I know
Sure.
that you worked in DevRel at Cohere. So if you were asked what is DevRel, how would you define it? And the second part of that question is, do you think there is a growing need for DevRel?
Yes, I'll answer the second one. Absolutely.
Hmm.
I feel like DevRel is. I feel like developers are the soul of a tech company.
Hmm.
No matter what your goal is, who your customer is, it's developers that build the tools that play with them that will give you feedback. And in a place, for example, like Cohere, or in a place
Hmm.
like the places that build baseline models, right? Like they build stuff for others to build on top of, right?
Yep.
A place like that needs developers more than anything. And so we had a very strong developer community that I was very proud of and I really liked. DevRel at Cohere was basically split in two. It was education and community.
Hmm.
So the education was an LLM university, and basically we taught courses on anything that was relevant and that was the technology that was coming out of Cohere and everything like that. So we had a great time teaching courses, giving lectures, making videos, labs, all that stuff. And the
Hmm.
other part was community, led by Sandra, which you know as well, Sandra Kubik, which we know, and she's
We all
wonderful.
love, yeah. Hmm.
She's great. So she had did a great is doing a great job with that community with a lot of hackathons. There was a lot of events. There's the ambassador and champions program, which you and I are part of, the influencer program. So I feel like just keeping a strong community of developers is the backbone of of a tech company. You know,
Hmm.
strong Discord community, events, stuff like that. The more you put into the dev community, I mean, you receive it back like
Yeah. You
multiplied by
do,
a
yeah.
lot.
Totally agree
So
with it.
yeah,
I personally experienced
you've seen that too, right?
that thing coming back. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
Okay. So I will leave you with one last question.
Sure.
And the question is, what do you think is the next or upcoming trend in AI?
Hmm. Great question. Yeah, I feel like we're seeing it already. I feel like we're
Hmm.
seeing, I mean, right now, LLMs, they're great. They just, text comes in, text comes out,
Yeah.
and that's good. But we're not gonna stay like that forever.
Hmm.
We don't learn text in, text out as humans. We learn with an image or with sound, or we don't even remember how we learned something. It could be a movie, it could have been reread. There's no difference. And when
Hmm.
we bring it out, it's the same thing. I could draw something, but I could say it, but I could also, put it in many ways. So multimodality is definitely, it's not even an upcoming trend. It's already
It's
happening, but I
already
think
happening. Yeah.
it'll become as ubiquitous as text models right now. Like
Hmm.
we're not going to go on ChatGPT and type. We're just going to talk to it and or show it something
Totally.
and get anything back. By the way, small parenthesis. I just a question
Yeah.
from before. I don't know if you saw a video by the guy from Khan Academy and his kid. They were talking about um they were learning with ChatGPT or with some multimodal.
Right.
They were asking it questions, and it was like being a tutor. I feel like that works for when you ask me about the
Mm,
education tools.
education part.
So
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
multimodality. Um,
Yeah.
and then after that, what I was mentioning on tool usage. Tool usage is
Hmm.
definitely another thing because yeah, I mean, if I could, we've seen it, we're seeing it now. For example, I could ask the model for code and then copy paste it into my code, or I could also just have
Right.
it in the code doing it directly, right? I could also like, yeah, if I'm doing things on Salesforce or some app, I can just tell it to do it and it does it, right?
Right.
On any app in the computer. I feel like tool usage, not just for input but for output, definitely is the next trend. And as for later, I mean, I feel like, yeah, like I feel like these things will be combined with reinforcement learning and robotics and have just moving things. Right now, everything's on the computer, but I feel like when
Yeah.
we put it together with moving things, and hopefully they hopefully they won't harm us. Instead, they will help us. Like in
Yeah.
the movies. I think that's the next trend when we have it just embedded in our lives. I feel like those are the things I can think of, but I always get
Yeah.
surprised. So five
Oh,
years, we'll
yeah.
listen to this in 5 years and be like, oh my God, you didn't imagine all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think multimodality is here. People are
Yeah.
definitely building upon it, but that's definitely the going on trend or rising one, I would
Yeah.
say. But yeah, yeah, that's all the questions I had for you, Louis. It was a wonderful conversation, and I was really looking forward to talking with you about all the questions I had. Thank you so much for answering those.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the great questions. I think you came up with some really good topics. So I had a great time here. Thank you.
Awesome.